story is called A Tale of Two Dreams. A long time ago, in the city of Aleppo, near Damascus, in that most distressful country we now call Syria, there lived a rich merchant, and his name was Hassan Bey. He was very rich. He had a fabulous mansion, and this mansion was at the end of an avenue lined with palm trees. He had stables out the back with the finest of Arabian horses. He had an orchard, and in the orchard he had almond trees and citrus trees, limes, lemons, oranges and all that. And his garden was amazing. It was like a little paradise. Oh, the flowers in that garden were so beautiful. 2 peacocks strutted around in that garden, and they were camouflaged by the colour of all the flowers around them. Every kind of a flower, beautiful trees, tamarind trees, and the smells from those trees was amazing. It'd be the sound of bees and the sound of nightingales flying from one tree to the other at night. And during the day, it was just like being in paradise. And there was another sound in that garden, and it was the sound of a little white marble fountain that was spraying up a colourful spray of water. And it was very soothing to listen to that fountain, like the Garden of Eden, maybe. Well, now, I said Hassan Bey was a rich man. He was a businessman, but he hadn't earned his own money himself. His parents had died, and they'd passed on the business to him. So he was sort of lazy himself, and he had a weakness. He liked to have a drink. And he had a man working for him, a servant. This man's name was Reza, and Reza was the manager of the business. And if Hassan Bey didn't have Reza to work for him, well, he would have no business worth talking about. Reza had a thin face, a bony face with a broken nose. And I'll tell you how he got the broken nose. His master, Hassan Bey, had broke poor Reza's nose one night when he was in a drunken fit. And we can only imagine that Reza sometime dreamed about getting revenge for this broken nose. Anyway, one day Hassan Bey told his servant to go into the marketplace because things had to be sold and bought. So Reza went into the marketplace, and the market square was crammed with people. There were so many people there. And there were people who were selling things, had stalls, and they were watching the brass pans of the weighing scales tip this way and that, and they were counting out money, and they were selling corn and various things. So Reza had done the selling, he was onto the buying, and he had to buy herbs and spices, and then he bought the drink, bottles of wine for his master. He was laden down with all these things, and there were so many people in that market square. And not only people buying, people just looking. There were also fire eaters, and there were storytellers, and there were jugglers. Anyway, a big crush of people. So Reza is making his way through this crush of people, and all of a sudden he's jostled, he's pushed from behind. And he turns around, he's annoyed, and he finds himself looking at a very tall man, a man wearing a hooded cloak. And he looks in to the hood to see the face of this man. It's just darkness in there. Then he sees 2 red eyes beginning to burn. And Reza suddenly realizes that he's looking into the face of none other than death. Well, a needle of dread pierces him. He finds himself rooted to the spot. He shakes off his fear. He drops the bags. He hears the bottles breaking. He turns and he runs through the crowd of people in the marketplace, bumping into this person and that, colliding with the jugglers and bringing down the big fountain of coloured balls they had left hanging in the air. He runs back home along the avenue of palm trees, starts banging on his master's door. Hassan Bey comes out and sees the state that Reza is in. He can see the man is frightened half to death. Reza says, "Master, master, lend me your horse. I have to leave town." "Why do you need my horse?" says Hassan Bey. He says, "I was in the marketplace and I met death and he threatened me. He's coming after me. If you lend me your horse, I'll ride away. I can get to the town of Safira by nightfall. It's only 30 miles. So Hassan Bey takes pity on his servant and he gives him the horse, and off rides Reza, the servant. Well, now Hassan Bey, he still didn't have his drink, so what does he do? He has to go into the town. And he goes into the tavern and he has several bottles of wine to drink, and then he's feeling fortified and full of himself. He buys more bottles to bring home. And he's carrying these bottles through the market square. It's still very crowded. And then over the heads of the people, he sees a tall man, a man wearing a long cloak with the hood. And he's feeling bold now because he's had a few drinks, and he goes up and he pushes this man in the back. He pushes Death in the back. And Death turns around, and Death has a quizzical look on his face, and the drunk man says, "You threatened my servant. You accosted my servant earlier on in the day. How dare you?" And Death says, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten your servant. It's just I was so surprised to meet him here in the town of Aleppo because, you see, I have an appointment with him tonight in the town of Safira." So that night, the servant lost his life in that town far away. He was found the next morning in a ditch with a knife between his shoulder blades, and people said robbers, obviously. And now, without his servant, Hassan Bey's business began to go to the dogs. He was no good as a businessman, and without this servant, he began to lose money hand over fist. He had to sell off his fine horses. In the orchard, the fruit lay rotting in the long grass, and the garden itself went to seed. The two peacocks hightailed it out of there. The bees even stopped coming to the garden. And that little white marble fountain in the corner of the garden, it stopped spraying up the soothing water, and it got covered with weeds and brambles and briars. Well, he was a poor man now, still living in the house. It had become ramshackled and all that. One night, Hassan Bey had a dream. And in the dream, the face of his dead servant, Riza, appeared to him. He recognized the face. Bony face, broken nose, tobacco-stained teeth, and the mouth moved. And Riza said to his old master, he said, "Hassan Bey, your fortune lies in the town of Cairo. Go there and seek it out." Well, he woke up the next morning, and you know yourself, you don't often remember the dreams, or sometimes you don't remember the dreams you'd had the night before. But then something happened that day, and he thought, I had a dream last night. And he remembered what his old dead servant Riza had said to him in the dream. "My fortune lies in Cairo. Well, I've nothing to lose by going to Cairo." So the last old horse he had, he saddled up that horse and he set off for Cairo. Now, if you know your maps of that part of the world, it's a long way from Syria to Cairo. And he had a long, dangerous journey through the desert. And dangerous things happened. There were stories of sandstorms and scorpions I could tell you about, but to make a long story short, finally, one evening, Hassan Bey arrived in Cairo, the city on the Nile. It was late. There was a little nail clipping of a new moon hanging up there in the dark blue sky. He had no money. Where was he going to stay? It was cold. Well, he found a mosque, a church there, and he went into the courtyard of this church, and he found a doorway, and he thought, if I snuggle up in here and pull my cloak tight around me, maybe I'll be warm enough to be able to sleep. And this is what he did. He pulled his cloak, his jalaba, tight around him, and he fell asleep. Now, Hassan Bey didn't realize, but that very same night, 4 robbers had broken into a house next door, and they had hammers and chisels, and they started banging at the wall, trying to break a hole in the wall of this house to get into the mosque to steal all the precious things in there. But they were hammering away, and they made such a racket that the neighbors called the guards, the police. And the guards came, and they caught those 4 men, and they found Hassan Bey asleep in the doorway, and they pounced on him, and they kicked him about the place, and they broke his nose into the bargain, and they dragged him off to prison. Well, he lay in that prison cell for 2 or 3 days, and one morning, the police chief had Hassan Bey brought before him. He said, "What are you doing? You're not from this country. We caught the robbers. You probably weren't involved. Tell me, why are you here?" So Hassan Bey said, "Well, I live in the town of Aleppo, very far from here, but I had a dream, and in the dream I was told I should come to Cairo because that's where my fortune lay." And when the chief police heard this, he started to laugh. "You are indeed a fool of a man. We all have dreams. You don't believe what you hear in your dreams. In fact," he said, "I've had a dream, not once, but 3 times, 3 nights running. And in this dream, a thin, bony-faced man appeared to me. He had a broken nose, just like the broken nose my policemen have given to you. And this man spoke, not once, but 3 nights running. He said, 'Police chief, your fortune lies in the town of Aleppo. Go there and go down a long avenue of palm trees. You'll come to an old tumble-down mansion, all boarded up. Go into the back garden. You'll see a small white marble fountain, all choked with brambles and briars. Dig under that fountain and you'll find a great treasury of gold and gems and emeralds and rubies, all kinds of costly diamonds. Now, do you think I'm going to give up my good job here in Cairo as chief of police and go all the way to Aleppo to start digging in somebody's garden? You're crazy if you think that. And here you are, you foolish man. You've come all the way to Cairo on the strength of one daft dream. He says, leave and go home. So Hassan Bey is given back his horse and he leaves. And as he's leaving the courtyard of that police barracks, he hears the sound of the police chief laughing from an upstairs window. But now Hassan Bey has something to smile about. He makes his way all the way back to his hometown of Aleppo. And he goes into his garden and he has a sickle and he cuts all those brambles and briars. And then he gets his pick and he starts digging under the little fountain and he's got a spade and he digs deep. And underneath that fountain, he finds a marvelous treasure. Gold coins, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, whatever you have on yourself. And now once more, Hassan Bey is a rich man. And he thinks that the first thing that he needs is a drink. And that's the story.